Hey guys, so what are the elements of recovery? A lot of times a person wants to know what is the kind of like the key idea, the one main principle that we can just focus on, and this could be enough like for the rest of the journey. And I've been pondering on this question for such a long time, and I honestly couldn't kind of like decide on one key element. And I think that there are more factors that play a role in the recovery process, and we cannot just leave them out and just single out one particular thing. And in this video, I want to share with you what are those elements of recovery as I see it, and also explain like how they kind of like interact together. So the first thing I want to say is that a recovery process is a complex process. It is not something that is like super straightforward, that it's enough just to have like 1 to 3 steps plan, and then if we are just following this blindly, it's gonna lead us to the place where we want to be. It doesn't really work that way. It really it's a deep work. It's not something that we can kind of like bypass or skip certain aspects. So I want to kind of present to you those elements. There are just 4 of them as I see them. So I don't know, maybe with time my understanding will clarify, but at the moment these are the main things that I find that were I couldn't leave out from my recovery process. And if one of them would not be there, I don't think recovery would be possible for me. So number 1 is understanding. And by understanding, I mean what we usually call here education, knowing and seeing what is actually going on with us, understanding how insomnia works, and understanding how sleep works, how anxiety works. Demystifying this whole experience is something that helps us just to understand what we are actually dealing with. It is very difficult to navigate this process without actually seeing how insomnia operates in us, what are the kind of principles that hold it together, and what are the principles that kind of like untangle this. So the education is basically new information, new perspective, different point of view. And this is a very helpful step because this is where we can start seeing that nothing is actually broken in us, and insomnia isn't some mysterious creature that just came into our lives for God knows what reason. It is actually a very kind of like understandable, pretty much logical thing that happens based on like what we know about how our brain works. And once we understand how it works, what it is, it gets easier to work with it. And I usually give this example that when, for example, someone is so afraid of flying, and no amount of telling them it's okay, just go there, don't worry, will not actually make them feel less scared of flying, of getting on an airplane. But as a person starts to learn about how the airplane works, how it stays in the air, what sort of forces are at play, what turbulence means, what all the sounds mean, right? So they acquire more information about it, and there is less mystery, there is more familiarity, more understanding. And as a byproduct, it gets easier to be with that discomfort, to go into that experience. It doesn't mean that fear instantly goes away by simply knowing something about something, but it makes it easier. And so education, understanding is one of these fundamental first steps in the recovery process. However, sometimes I hear messages like this, that I learned everything there is to know, I watched so many videos, I understand everything, but I'm still not doing better. So why is it not enough, like just education alone? And the thing is that is true. Education alone is not what's kind of like the ultimate solution to this problem. There are other things that need to happen in addition to understanding. So education might be a very nice kind of like first shift. It can give us a little bit of maybe this confidence, trust, clarity, but then there's also certain things that need to happen as well. So that's why like education, like also at some point it kind of reaches its limit. It doesn't go any further, and we feel kind of stuck. Then that's when we also need to incorporate another element into the recovery process, which is exposure, the actual experience, going through difficult nights, going through uncomfortable emotions such as anxiety, hyperarousal, heart palpitation, whatever feelings that are arising when our fear of not sleeping is activated. We just need to be present with that, with what's coming up in us, not trying to run away from it. And this is why exposing ourselves to things that we try to avoid for such a long time is something that can help our brain see that there is nothing to be afraid of. And this is what I usually say, like that in the process of recovery, roughly speaking, two parts of our brain are involved. Essentially, there's a rational part. That's where education happens. That's where we understand that everything, like nothing is broken with us, that our sleepability is still there, and then that we just need to stop resisting. But that intellectual understanding isn't quite enough. That the second part of our brain that is more reactive, more emotional, it needs to learn through experience. It doesn't really learn through rational argumentation. It has to see it to believe it, and that's why we also need the experiential part, the actual raw applied, like experience, exposure. But again, like exposure itself, if it's isolated, nothing else is there, it's also not the ultimate thing here, because think about this way. People who struggled with insomnia for years, decades, they have plenty opportunity to meet with that experience, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that they actually that experience actually helped them to move closer to recovery. There is other things that are also needed to happen in this process. So exposure is a very valuable part of the recovery process, but it needs to work in a combination with other things. And then the other things that makes exposure more meaningful that's the third part, is the attitude, the perspective. It is when we start challenging our beliefs about sleep, wakefulness, tiredness, anxiety, anything we believe to be true about this experience. They need to be approached with a different mindset. We need to challenge our thinking here. And this is why when we do the same thing, like let's say do the exposure with a mindset like, okay, I'm just going to tough through this, and I hope somehow in the future it's going to solve itself, it won't do actually any good to us, because we are just going to torture ourselves through something without actually understanding being changed and perspectives being shifted. We also need to go into it with a different attitude. And that's where like education can help us shift the attitude. It can help us shift the perspective, and then this can also facilitate the exposure, the practical part. This is what I mean by a recovery being a complex process. We cannot just single out one element and just do it like in isolation. There needs to be like more. It's like an ecosystem that is playing out at the same time. And next on the list, the next item, like the component of recovery, is compassion, self-kindness. And this is what probably you heard me saying it a lot of times, that it's very valuable to remain compassionate and kind to ourselves as we are navigating such a difficult process. And again, if we are, let's say, doing the exposures, like doing kind of like mental shifts, but at the same time we are very harsh with ourselves for any imperfections, when we are criticizing ourselves for things not going the way we would like them to go, it's also not very helpful. And I usually think of self-kindness as like a lubricant in this whole process. It's just makes other elements of recovery a little bit more bearable, a little bit more manageable for ourselves. And so those four things, understanding, exposure, attitude, and compassion, they are kind of like work in a very nice combination. Like if you imagine this this kind of like set of gears when they meet at certain, like in a certain combination, then the whole thing starts to work out, and there is movement. If you take away one gear from this whole thing, then not much movement is happening. And this is why it is very helpful to have this kind of like overall understanding of this whole like recovery process, not just like selecting one thing and thinking this is the ultimate solution to it. Because yes, we need education, we need to understand what is going on, but education alone is not going to do the whole work. We also need experience. We need the exposure, exposing ourselves to things that we were trying to avoid for such a long time. But when we are only focusing on exposure without changing mindset, changing perspective, without compassion, it's also not going to do so much, like it's not going to bring us so much like a benefit alone, right? And if we are only focused on thinking, like only trying to think our way out, like to find a perfect perspective, but we are still like, we don't show it with our behavior, we are not making choices in life that help us like face with our fears, also not much like there is as much we can do within just kind of like mental work, right? So this is why this is such a tricky and complex process. It's not impossible, obviously, but it is very helpful just to remind ourselves that as we are doing things, right, we need to start changing the way we think, the way we act, the way we relate to ourselves, and in combination, those things, they start making changes.